What if we start with you sharing your excitement because you attended a tasting that was like one of the best tastings that you've been to?
Yeah, this weekend I got to taste two of the wines which for I guess 25 years now have been on my top 3 list of wines I want to taste, which they came blind. I had no idea that they would show up, so I knew there was going to be some great wines, but I finally tasted 47 Cheval Blanc and 61 Latour, which was, insane. The wines came blind, so I was sitting, I'd written the full tasting note of something absolutely spectacular that I had in my glass. I gave the wine 100 points and thought it was just incredible, and was wondering, well, I was pretty sure it was a Bordeaux wine actually. And then these wines were served 2 in a flight, so I was halfway into the second wine, which was definitely older and also incredibly good. And so I was halfway more or less into tasting when the owner of the bottle started telling his story. And I heard that story before, so I knew that with this story, I didn't remember which winery, but I knew which of 2 wineries. But I knew that it was either about Vega Sicilia or about Chateau Latour. So I knew that I had scored either a Vega Sicilia or a Chateau Latour 100 points. And I was now having another, which would be from the same chateau, which would be, which was also fantastic, really, really lovely. And it turned out that flight was 1945 Latour and 61 Latour.
Because that's like the most legendary stuff that you can get.
Yeah, that's 2 of the most legendary wines ever produced. If someone told me you could choose one wine ever made that you want to taste, it would be 45 Mouton. Mature Bordeaux is, for me, that's what makes Bordeaux. That's the greatest wines out there. The complexity that happens in an old mature Bordeaux is beyond anything. My fascination of Burgundy is completely different. It's a so different animal.
So your vision of the perfect wine, you truly got to experience that in that tasting that you attended.
I've tasted several wines I've scored 100 points, but these legendary wines, which have been seen as some of the best wines ever made for as long as they've been around, which is now, 60, 70, 80 years. So these wines are not young, and they've been always considered as some of the best made, and they're still considered some of the best ever made. Which is hugely impressive, because with the amount of great vintages we have now, I'm sure we have legends on the same quality level, from recent vintages, 2010, 29, 2005, possibly 2016, and even more vintages. There will be wines which will attain this legendary status, but back in those days, it wasn't that many. And ever since I read Michael Broadbent's vintage wine book, which I probably started reading in 2003 or something. I think it was released in 2000. I don't remember exactly. I think the newest vintage in the book is 2000. But I bought that more or less when it was released. I had tasted Yquem, but I don't think I've tasted any of the red first growth. And I just saw all of these tasting notes. And also reading Decanter, Wine Spectator, articles about some of the most legendary wines ever made, and of course these were on that. And considering I hadn't really even tasted any first growth when I started reading about these wines, except for Yquem. Back then I was like, I hope I will get to taste a bottle of each of the first growth. Today that's a different story. I've tasted on some of these estates several hundred bottles, which is just insane. But for some reason, well, of course, these wines are insanely expensive, but those two wines, which has been on my top 3 dream list for probably 25 years, is now finally tasted and experienced. And I'm not sure if I'm still really understood that I've done that. And the Cheval Blanc, that was also scored 100 points before I actually realized or knew what it was. One of the descriptions it's had is that it's port-like. Well, I've had a fake Vandermeulen bottle of 47 before, which was,
not that
understood actually more or less immediately when I saw the bottle that there's something not right here. And it's one of the most faked wines out there as well. But it just didn't fit. The foil was wrong. The label looked weird. I don't think someone would put this on the market sort of label. And then we opened the cork, and the cork came out like a champagne cork, so fat that it was bigger than the neck, meaning that cork had probably only been in the bottle for a few weeks. It was a Bordeaux wine, I'm pretty sure, but it was probably a €25 Saint-Emilion, not the real thing. It was definitely not the Cheval Blanc. It was a decent wine, but that's it. And it was bought at the auction house by a Norwegian collector, and the auction house got really embarrassed, so they sent the absolutely fantastic 61 Latour Pomerol as a replacement, which was gorgeous. No, but that Cheval Blanc has always been described as port-like. There was definitely some sweetness to the fruit still. Could somehow resemble maybe a old vintage port with sweeter figs, riper figs and dates than what is typical of a old vintage. It was truly fascinating.
But okay, so talking about the Médoc appellation, was it any wines from the Médoc appellations?
No, this was a tasting with more or less only iconic wines, and unfortunately for Médoc, there's no really iconic wines in Médoc appellation. There are from the Médoc Peninsula, because these are two different things. Médoc as an appellation is the northernmost part of the peninsula, which starts in Bordeaux and goes all the way up to where it meets the Atlantic Ocean in the Bay of Biscay. The Médoc as an appellation starts more or less at the northern part of Saint-Estèphe. From Bordeaux city up to the north of Saint-Estèphe, it's Haut Médoc, meaning the high Médoc. It's not particularly high. Its highest point is 28 meters or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's not very high, or maybe it's a bit higher, but it's fairly low. But it's even flatter on in the Médoc, and the drainage from the 17th century of the Dutch is they drained all of the Médoc, but you still had vineyards on the classified estates before that. We know that at least Chateau Latour probably made wine because people have ordered wine from Saint-Mombert, as it was called. And that was the name of Chateau Latour before it became Chateau Latour. So people have ordered wine and specified that they didn't want any Pauillac, they wanted from Saint-Mombert. And that was, I think, in the 1400s or something. So they have made wine for longer than people realize. Well, we know that Chateau Izan in Margaux made wine in 1152 because the wine from, it was called La Motte Cantenac, I think. It was drunk on the wedding between Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II, well, later Henry II of England. So in that wedding in 1152, they drank wine from what is today called Chateau Izan. And this is a difficulty in France because the French Revolution, the people who kept the records were the nobility. And to save their heads during the revolution, they burned a lot of documents, both their own lives and their customers' lives, because they tended to be the nobility as well. And what wasn't ruined by the French Revolution tended to be ruined during the Second World War. So it's some history can be really difficult to trace in France. But If you look at it from a geographical point of view, everything is Médoc. If you ask someone local, where does Médoc start? He would say it starts in Bordeaux, because they are not talking about wine appellations. And this is the confusing part, because all of it is Médoc. Everything here is in Médoc, but if you see Médoc on the wine bottle, it's only from the northern half, or northern 40%, or whatever it is. And there's no classified estates here. But this is a place where you find a lot of Cru Bourgeois. You find a lot of quality wines, which are fairly inexpensive. So most Médoc wines would be less than 40 euros a bottle. A huge amount of them would be 20 to 30 euros a bottle. So, and some of them age really nicely up to 15, 20, 25 years. Some even more, but those are more of an exception. So that's this is a place where you can get a lot of, if you really enjoy Bordeaux wines with a little bit less concentration than the classified estates, you can get some huge value here.
Exactly.
But you also have to look out a bit, because there are some quite skinny and thin ones as well.
Yeah.
And this is definitely the place to look for wines in really warm top vintages, because then you can have some really nice surprises, which doesn't cost much.
And you can afford to experiment.
Yeah, you can definitely afford to experiment.
I actually found one from Médoc, 10 years old, 2015, Cru Bourgeois. And it was what we are talking about here with the, when you
that was
open
about 15 euros or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it had the same life, the same curve that you would expect from a great wine. It's just in a mini version.
Yeah, it's just lighter.
It had fruit development, and it started out with a lot of berries and fruits, opened up quite quickly, but then 1 hour later, it was only touched aromas with, just forests and leaves and stuff like that, mushrooms, and then it was just gone.
Yeah.
Like 1.5 hours later, it was gone. But it was a travel.
Yeah.
A little mini journey, and you don't pay anything, and you can have kind of the same experience.
Yeah, and they get the tobacco, they get the dates and figs like the classifieds do, but it's just they don't have the concentration, they don't have the complexity, they don't have the aftertaste. But you sort of get a mini version of. You get quite a bit of the fun, but you don't get all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about the appellation. Médoc. It's not worth to mention too many great producers. It's more worth to talk about what you can expect from the area.
Yeah, well, I don't think you can say that there are great producers here when you compare it to the rest of Médoc, but there's good value. And if you love Bordeaux style wines and you don't want to spend, 150, 200 euros a bottle, but you still want something which has some of the same aromas. You can buy these much cheaper, and most of them will at 10 years old be really lovely to drink, and up to 15. There are a few that can be older, but you don't have to store them that long to get this experience. And if you find them on the shelf, especially in France, it's not that difficult to find 2016, which would probably drink really well now, or 2015. Sometimes you actually even see a 2010, even if those are starting to get difficult to find, but 2011s can still be really lovely. So if you find a Médoc 11, I would have tried the 14 as well. 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, all of these vintages, they will be really lovely, but you have to like the style, of course, because they lack a little bit of the body which the Grand Cru Classés have, but they're really cheap. You can buy a case for the price of a single bottle of a Grand Cru Classé, even if the prices of Grand Cru Classé differ a lot. So but you can easily buy these wines for, as you said, you had one for 15 euros. In Norway, which with all our taxes, so that's probably a 10 euro bottle if you find it in France.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the use case for having an appellation called Médoc? Is that just to know where the wine's from?
Yeah.
So
and that it hopefully is some sort of quality level.
Yeah, so what would be the difference, would you say, between an appellation then and a classification?
Classification doesn't really tell you where it's from, it tells you about the quality level. Appellation means it's from within these borders, and those borders are definite. There are a few wineries which have vineyards in a different appellation, some smaller vineyards normally, as smaller parcels, which can put them into wine from a different appellation because they've always sort of owned them. And but there are also owners who actually need to bottle two different wines, where one is a Médoc and one is a Médoc, or one is a Pauillac and one is a Médoc, or whatever vineyards you own, even if it's actually the same estate.
So that begs the question, if you run a winery in Médoc, can everybody just call it and write the Médoc appellation on the...
As long as you follow the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of rules is that?
That you can't grow Syrah or Tempranillo or Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. Well, you can grow them, but then you can't call it a Médoc.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even call it Bordeaux.
Mm-hmm. So Bordeaux is like a huge appellation, like...
Yeah, Bordeaux is a huge appellation. So all of this, you could always declassify. So if you're a Médoc, you can't really declassify that much. You can declassify it to Bordeaux or Vin de France. But if you're a Pauillac, you could also declassify it to Au Médoc. So for example, if you own a classified estate and the production is too big for what is legal for, say, Pauillac, you could declassify some of those grapes and either put them into a third wine, which you could call either Bordeaux or Au Médoc, or you could sell them off as bulk wine to a negociant, which would create some, fairy tale wine, called whatever they want to call it. And they can also choose what they want to call it depending on the yield level, which could be 5% or 10% more than what is actually allowed. So sometimes the amount of grapes which are harvested can be higher than what's legal, but you can't classify those grapes. Honestly, I don't really care that much about that part of the business. Yeah. So some absolute nerd out there will say, no, that's not quite right, but yeah, there we go. That's there's a lot of these strange rules which are absolutely incredibly boring, and that's not why I'm into wine.
But but also, so you could say that basically the appellation protects or like guarantee you as a consumer that the grapes are from that area.
Yeah, and that was the original meaning about the appellation. It was that people were starting to fake wines, saying that this wine, I think the first appellation was Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and people around in Rhône were saying, this is Châteauneuf-du-Pape, even if it was made, 10 or 100 kilometers away. And that was the start of the appellation system, and I think it was Châteauneuf-du-Pape which was the first one. This is fairly new. All these rules came to everything. You had people who bought grapes from Spain or from Languedoc or from the Rhône Valley to get a bit more body into a Bordeaux wine. So that was called Hermitagification or something like that. Mm-hmm. There was people who did that, so you also had to protect. Maybe the wine got a bit better, but it was still, you sold something which was not from where it was supposed to be from. So the appellation system was created so that you have a guarantee that those grapes have grown within those borders. That's basically what the appellation is. So it's a completely different thing to the classification, which is supposed to show you what rank are these wines within the borders of where it's grown. Yeah.
Perfect. So is there anything more to say about the Médoc appellation then?
I think that's probably covering. It's a place to look for good quality, inexpensive wines if you need something which is good for the steak, but you don't want to spend too much money.
And it's the northernmost
part of the entire Médoc Peninsula. So you have to remember that as if you go to Médoc on Google, you can go everywhere from Bordeaux and all the way up, because that's called Médoc as a place. But if you're talking about wine, it's from the northern 40 to 50% of the, well, from Sancti Stephan north.